I think we're still in the dark a bit about how much further the government is prepared to go. We thought we would hear more from Andy Burnham at the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow yesterday. Miatta Fahnbulleh, 3 days into her job, paying a visit to Aberdeen. But, we know that there's a change in the direction of travel. We don't have clarity about how far the government's likely to go.
The Times reports that Andy Burnham will make a decision within the next few weeks about undeveloped sites. It's understood that he and his new Energy Secretary, Miatta Fahnbulleh, could give the green light to drilling at two much talked about oil and gas fields, Rosebank and Jackdaw, both in the North Sea. Let's speak to John Boothman, Scottish political correspondent at the Times and the Sunday Times. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Calum.
Let's go back to basics. What are Jackdaw and Rosebank, and where are they, first of all?
Jackdaw's a gas field, Rosebank's an oil field, two huge developments that we've been waiting on decisions about for a long time. In particular, it's of concern to people in the northeast of Scotland because thousands of jobs are at stake in an industry where, in Scotland, at least over the past decade, I think something like 60,000 jobs have been lost, and the projections are in future that there's 1,000 jobs a month in the UK between now and 2030 going from that industry as it winds down effectively.
In terms of the kind of political back and forth on this feels like it's been going on for a long time because there have been environmental impact assessments and there have been reviews and there have been consultations. It has been quite a process. Now we may be nearing the end of it.
And it's also the case that the political parties' stances have all changed over recent times. Labour went into the election in 2024 saying there would be no new drilling in the North Sea and really taking a very cautious approach in terms of further development of the North Sea. The SNP, for example, have swung widely from a pure net zero position under Nicola Sturgeon to, really a position where they are, now in the realms of energy security being much more important in their thinking, and that there should be some change. The Conservatives in Reform, we know, are down the drill baby drill sort of road. So there's been a bit of change and inconsistency, but the world's changed. Global oil prices are currently going through the roof, over $100 a barrel. We are now talking about prioritising domestic energy production rather than importing more, which people think might save the country money. And as I say, there's that critical issue of jobs and the fact that the transition to net zero in terms of, the new renewables industry may be going fast, but not as fast as to keep up with the loss of jobs in the oil and gas sector.
In terms of this reporting then this morning, Andy Burnham ready to move quickly, a decision within weeks, and this is once this consultation period ends. The suggestion here, John, is that if there was approval in August, that actually production would commence by the 1st of October. These things are very much ready to go, aren't they?
Well, look, the industry has said that that's how quickly these things could happen, that production could happen very, very quickly if approval were given. There's a public consultation going on that finishes on August the 10th about the future of these developments. What's interesting, though, is I think we're still in the dark a bit about how much further the government is prepared to go. We thought we would hear more from Andy Burnham at the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow yesterday. Miatta Fahnbulleh, 3 days into her job, paying a visit to Aberdeen. But, we know that there's a change in the direction of travel. We don't have clarity about how far the government's likely to go, particularly in relation to new licences to drill, given Labour had that commitment in its manifesto not to sanction any.
Yeah, that's a good point on how much further they will go. And I suppose the other part of this politically is that it keeps up the momentum for Andy Burnham if in a couple of weeks' time, a few weeks' time, he can make this announcement, because we've had a series of announcements this week. He is looking, I suppose, to keep feeding that beast, as it were, to keep announcing things. Can he draw the line between scaling up North Sea oil and gas production and this kind of mantra that he's got about giving people a bit of breathing space? Is there a direct correlation between Rosebank, Jackdaw and my energy bills?
I think, look, at the end of the day, pragmatism is the order of the day for this government. The suggestion is that, that balance can be found, that balance can be struck. I don't think we'll end up going down the road as Donald Trump said last week, that Andy Burnham would fully open the North Sea and they'd be dancing in the streets of Aberdeen. Takes quite a lot for that to happen. But, this is something that the government, I think, knows it's necessary to do. But again, how far will it go is really the question.
Now, it's quite a distinction as well in the Burnham era, where Ed Miliband is now not the Energy Secretary, compared to the Starmer era, where Burnham was the Energy Secretary and became something of a lightning rod for dissatisfaction at government energy policy. Now, the flip side of that is credit to somebody who is leading a department, pursuing his brief doggedly, not backing down from what he thinks was the right policy to pursue. But within days of his move to Foreign Secretary, this is now the conversation. It's quite interesting politically.
Yes, it is, right. That having been said, Miatta Fahnbulleh in her previous roles has been somebody who you would put in the same sort of camp as Ed Miliband. But I think, after yesterday's discussions, which the industry had with her, they thought that these discussions were constructive. But like them and everybody else, we're waiting to see how far the government's going to go.
Yeah. John, good to speak to you this morning. Thanks very much. That is John Boothman, Scottish political correspondent for The Times and The Sunday Times. And so we wait for this consultation period to end, but The Times reporting that Andy Burnham is basically standing by to get oil and gas production on the move.
It is really interesting how policy has changed in this specific area over the last 3 years, shall we say. What the Labour government inherited, then you have an energy secretary who is very clear, no new drilling, no new licences. Then I wonder how much that by-election in Aberdeen South actually shifted things when the Conservatives overturn majority from the SNP by about 6,500 to say on basically a by-election that was on a referendum on oil and gas drilling. And now the Labour Party think we follow suit.
And the other part of that, exactly that, is to consider to what extent is Andy Burnham a lucky general, to use the cliche, because this consultation period was obviously running while Starmer was PM. Would Starmer's government have got to a position similar to this, where they would have approved Rosebank and Jackdaw following the consultation? Andy Burnham clearly is now the Prime Minister, that is the reality, and he is looking for room to manoeuvre. He is looking for breathing room for himself in order to allow breathing room for everybody else, and this might just be a gift for him in a few weeks' time.
Yes, so interestingly, Labour's 2024 manifesto, which Andy Burnham has said he's not going to veer from, pledged not to issue any new oil gas licences. So Burnham has said he'll stick to that manifesto. What this is an expansion of the plants that are already there. I think with Ed Miliband as Energy Secretary, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing to consider. And also this idea that Miatta Fahnbulleh's come in as Energy Secretary, and I suppose on what conditions, who knows what the conversation was like, because we'd heard for weeks, hadn't we, that Andy Burnham was a bit more pro-drilling than perhaps Starmer and Miliband were.